The attack on Earth was swift and brutal. The Zeltrians, a powerful alien race, descended upon the planet with a force no one had expected. Cities were reduced to rubble, and millions of lives were lost. In the wake of the destruction, the nations of Earth set aside their differences. There was no time for petty quarrels when the entire planet was under threat. Humanity had been pushed to the edge, but now something inside them began to awaken: the need for revenge. Admiral Xander stood at the command center of Earth's largest warship, the Eagle's Fury. The holographic display before him showed the immense fleet of 900,000 warships that had been assembled for this very purpose. It was a fleet unlike any the universe had ever seen, built from the combined might of Earth's military forces. Thousands of soldiers, engineers, and scientists had worked tirelessly to ensure that this fleet was ready to launch. The human race was united, and now they would show the Zeltrians just how far they had pushed them. "We're ready, Admiral," said Lieutenant Sarah Vega, standing beside him. Her eyes were filled with determination, but there was also a hint of sadness. Her family had been among the millions lost during the invasion. Revenge was personal for her. Xander nodded silently. He knew what this mission meant for everyone on board. It wasn't just about military strategy anymore. It was about honoring those they had lost and ensuring that the Zeltrians paid the price for what they had done. The fleet was not only going to avenge Earth, it was going to make sure no other species would dare to attack humanity again. "Initiate the launch sequence," Admiral Xander ordered. His voice was steady, but inside, a storm of emotions raged: anger, sorrow, and the fierce will to protect what was left of his world filled his heart. He had lost too much to allow the Zeltrians to walk away unscathed. The massive engines of the Eagle's Fury hummed to life, and the rest of the fleet followed suit. The ships began their journey toward the Zeltrian homeworld, each one moving with purpose. The vastness of the fleet was a testament to humanity's determination. 900,000 warships, each representing a nation, a family, and a future. As they neared the Zeltrian border, the mood on board was tense. The crew knew they were about to face an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. The Zeltrians were known for their advanced technology, their ruthless nature, and their ability to wipe out entire civilizations. But Earth was different. Earth had something the Zeltrians didn't: humanity's spirit. "All systems are online, Admiral," reported Commander Elijah Wright, his voice cutting through the tension. "We're ready for the final jump into their territory." Xander took a deep breath and looked at the planet behind them. Earth, the world that had been scared and broken, now had its eyes set on vengeance. They were going to make the Zeltrians regret ever thinking they could conquer humanity. "Engage the jump drive," Xander said, his voice hard as steel. "For Earth, for those we lost." The fleet surged forward, disappearing into the vast emptiness of space. As the stars blurred into streaks of light, Xander couldn't help but wonder, was humanity truly prepared for what awaited them? Or was this the beginning of a battle that would cost them everything? The warships moved silently through space, their engines burning bright. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change the fate of both Earth and the Zeltrian Empire forever. As Earth's fleet entered Zeltrian space, a strange silence filled the command deck of the Eagle's Fury. The ships glided through the vast emptiness of space, their hulls gleaming under the light of distant stars. The crew, tense and alert, waited for the first sign of the enemy. Everyone knew that this moment had been years in the making, and failure was not an option. Admiral Xander stood at the command center, his gaze fixed on the vast star map before him. His fingers hovered over the controls, ready to give the order at any moment. "Prepare for immediate contact," he said, his voice cold and firm. His eyes didn't leave the map, but he could feel the weight of the coming battle pressing down on him. The Zeltrians had been silent, no signs of activity coming from their territory. It was strange, too strange. The fleet had expected to face resistance the moment they crossed into enemy space, but instead, the enemy seemed to be waiting, watching. "Admiral," "We've detected an energy spike." Lieutenant Vega's voice suddenly broke the silence. She was at her station, her eyes wide with shock. "It's coming from their homeworld." Xander's heart raced. "On screen," he ordered. The main display flickered and then zoomed in on the Zeltrian homeworld. A massive energy beam, unlike anything humanity had ever seen, shot up from the planet's surface. It sliced through space with a terrifying power, creating ripples across the void. The beam glowed with a dark, almost unnatural hue, pulsating as if it had a life of its own. "What is that?" asked Commander Wright, his voice low. He had seen many powerful weapons in his career, but nothing like this. "It's the source of their strength," Xander said, his voice grim. "They'd been hiding this from us." The Zeltrians had been preparing for this moment for years. Xander knew they had technology far beyond anything humanity had created, but this was something else. This wasn't just advanced technology. It was something deeply alien, something that felt wrong. He had seen nothing like it before, and it terrified him. "Activate shields, now," Xander barked. The fleet had only moments before the energy beam would strike. The Eagle's Fury shields flared to life, glowing brightly as they wrapped around the ship in a protective dome. The fleet followed suit, raising their shields in perfect unison. As the energy beam approached, Xander's mind raced. Could their shields hold against whatever this was? He wasn't sure, but there was no time to hesitate. They had no choice but to face it head-on. "Brace for impact," he ordered. The beam collided with the human fleet in an explosion of light and sound. The shockwave rocked the ships, shaking the crew and sending alarms blaring through the command deck. For a moment, Xander thought the fleet might be torn apart. But the shields held, barely. The energy beam slid off the protective barrier, dissipating into space, leaving behind a faint glowing trail. "We're still intact," Wright said, his voice full of disbelief. Xander let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. That was just the beginning. "The Zeltrians are far more dangerous than we thought. They knew we were coming." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Humanity had been preparing for this battle for years, but they had underestimated their enemy. The Zeltrians had a weapon unlike anything they had ever imagined, and if this was only the start, what else awaited them? "Stay alert," Xander ordered. "This war has only just begun." The fleet moved forward, knowing that the real battle was still ahead of them, and that they would need every ounce of their strength to survive what was coming. The enemy's secret had been revealed, and now humanity was about to face the full force of the Zeltrian Empire. The shockwave from the Zeltrian energy beam had left Earth's fleet shaken, but they were still alive. As the ships recovered, a tense silence settled over the command deck of the Eagle's Fury. Admiral Xander stood tall, his eyes narrowed as he stared at the holographic display showing the Zeltrian homeworld. The enemy had shown their hand, and now it was up to humanity to find a way to defeat them. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the fleet's lead engineer, Dr. Emily Carter," Lieutenant Vega reported, her voice steady but urgent. Xander nodded, gesturing for the transmission to be routed to the main screen. Dr. Carter's face appeared, her expression tight with concern. "Admiral, I need you to listen carefully. The energy beam we just encountered, it's not just a weapon. It's a part of something much bigger. We believe it's connected to a device buried deep beneath the Zeltrian homeworld, and that device might be controlling everything." Xander's heart skipped a beat. A device. If they could locate and destroy it, perhaps they could stop the Zeltrians' overwhelming power. "How sure are you of this?" he asked. "We're running simulations based on the energy signatures we detected. The readings suggest that the energy beam is being channeled through some kind of central hub. If we can find that hub, we might be able to shut it down," Dr. Carter explained. Xander's mind raced. Finding the device on the Zeltrian homeworld would not be easy, but it was their only chance. "What do you need to make this happen?" he asked, already mentally preparing for the difficult journey ahead. "We'll need to send a team to the surface. Dr. Carter replied. "A small strike force. But the area is heavily guarded. I'm afraid this will be a high-risk operation." Xander looked around the command deck. The fleet had already suffered significant damage, and they were only beginning to understand the full extent of the Zoltrians' capabilities. The stakes had never been higher. "Prepare the team," Xander ordered. "We'll take the fight to them. But be ready for anything. I don't trust the Zoltrians to let us get close to their weapon without a fight." "Understood, Admiral," Dr. Carter said, before the transmission ended. As the command deck fell silent once more, Xander turned to Commander Wright. "Get the fleet ready. We'll need full air support to protect the ground team. This is our only shot at stopping them." Wright nodded, but there was a look of uncertainty in his eyes. What if the device is just the beginning of their power? What if there's something even worse waiting for us? Xander didn't have an answer, but he knew that they couldn't afford to wait. The Zoltrians had already shown that they had secrets beyond anything Earth had prepared for. But now, humanity had its own secret, a drive to survive, and a thirst for vengeance that would not be easily quenched. "We don't have the luxury of doubt, Commander," Xander said, his voice resolute. "We fight, and we fight hard. If we fall, we'll fall together. But if we succeed, Earth will have its revenge." With that, Xander turned back to the view of the Zoltrian homeworld. It seemed quiet now, but he knew better. The storm was coming, and it would be their greatest battle yet. The time had come to take the fight to the enemy and destroy their weapon once and for all. The fleet moved closer to the Zoltrian homeworld, but the silence from the enemy was eerie. Admiral Xander couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The closer they got, the more the atmosphere seemed to thicken with tension. He knew the Zoltrians were hiding something. They always had been. But what could be worse than the weapon they had just unleashed on them? The mission was clear. Dr. Carter had found the location of the device, a massive underground facility buried deep beneath the surface of the Zoltrian planet. Earth's best soldiers, led by Colonel Hannah Pierce, were preparing to land and destroy the weapon. But Xander couldn't shake the nagging feeling that the battle wasn't just about the device. There was something deeper at play, something the Zoltrians had kept hidden for far too long. "Admiral," Lieutenant Vega said, her voice interrupting his thoughts. "We've received another transmission from Dr. Carter. She's uncovered something new." Xander walked over to the communication station, his heart beating faster. "Put it through." Dr. Carter's face appeared again on the screen, but this time, her expression was even more grave than before. "Admiral, you need to hear this," she began, her voice tinged with disbelief. "We've been running deeper scans of the energy signatures, and we found something unexpected. The device isn't just a weapon, it's alive." Xander's brow furrowed. "What do you mean, alive?" "I mean," Dr. Carter continued, "the energy source is biologically based. The Zoltrians have somehow managed to fuse technology and living organisms into one. The power they've been using to fuel their weapons is actually drawn from a living organism that they've been feeding on for centuries." Xander took a step back, trying to process her words. "A living organism," he repeated. "What kind of organism?" "We don't have full details yet, but the scans suggest it's something far more advanced than any life form we've encountered. It could be the very source of the Zoltrians' power. It's like they've been feeding off of it, using it to fuel their war machine," Dr. Carter explained, her voice shaking. Xander was silent for a moment. The idea that the enemy's power came from something alive, something they had been using and perhaps even torturing, sent a chill down his spine. "If we destroy the device, will it stop them?" "We believe so, but it's not simple," Dr. Carter replied. "The organism seems to be deeply integrated into their entire system. Destroying the device could destabilize their power completely, but it might also trigger something catastrophic. We just don't know what it might do." Xander stared at the screen, his mind racing. He had always thought of the Zoltrians as nothing more than a ruthless enemy. But now he was faced with the terrible truth. They were using an innocent life form as fuel for their war, and it had been kept hidden for centuries. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about stopping a cycle of cruelty that had gone unnoticed for far too long. "We'll take the risk," Sander said, his voice firm. "If we don't destroy it, the Zeltrians will just keep using it. We can't allow that to happen." Dr. Carter nodded grimly. "Understood, Admiral. We'll proceed with caution, but we'll need your fleet to be ready. The enemy will know we're coming." As the transmission ended, Sander felt a deep sense of resolve. The fate of humanity and the Zeltrians had become intertwined with the life of this mysterious organism. Whatever the outcome, he knew this mission had just become much more than an act of vengeance. It was a fight to stop the Zeltrians' cruelty and end their reign of terror. "Prepare the fleet for the final assault," Sander ordered. "We'll make sure this secret doesn't stay hidden any longer." The human fleet was now fully committed. The time for hesitation had passed. With the knowledge that the Zeltrians had been using a living organism to fuel their weapons, Admiral Xander felt the weight of the mission pressing down on him. The biological weapon was a mystery, one that humanity had yet to fully understand. But it was clear that the device on the Zeltrian homeworld was the key to everything. Colonel Hannah Pierce and her team of elite soldiers prepared for the dangerous mission to infiltrate the Zeltrian capital. The plan was simple: land on the surface, find the device, and destroy it. But Sander knew that nothing in this war had been simple. The Zeltrians were not just using advanced technology. They were hiding something far more dangerous. As the Eagle's Fury and the rest of the fleet positioned themselves in orbit above the Zeltrian homeworld, Sander gathered his senior officers in the command center. "We don't know what we'll face down there," Xander said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "But we do know this: if we don't stop this biological weapon, everything we fought for will be for nothing. Colonel Pierce, I need you and your team to destroy that device at all costs." Colonel Pierce, a seasoned warrior with years of combat experience, nodded. "Understood, Admiral. We'll do whatever it takes." "We'll give you air support from above," Commander Wright added. "But once you're on the ground, you're on your own. The Zeltrians will come after you with everything they've got." Pierce gave a small smile. "We're used to that." Xander watched as the team, outfitted with the latest technology, boarded their transport ships. The atmosphere on the deck was tense, but there was a quiet determination in their eyes. They knew what was at stake, and they were ready to face whatever awaited them on the surface. The transport ships descended toward the Zeltrian homeworld, cutting through the dark sky like silent shadows. As they neared the planet's surface, the glow of the enemy cities below seemed to pulse with an eerie, unnatural light. It was as if the planet itself was alive, feeding off the strange energy that had been harnessed for centuries. Colonel Pierce's voice crackled over the comms. "We're approaching the landing zone. All teams, prepare for immediate deployment." The moment the transport ships landed, the soldiers disembarked, weapons at the ready. They were met with a cold, alien landscape: barren fields, twisted metallic structures, and a sky filled with dark clouds that seemed to swirl around the mysterious energy source below. "We've got to move fast," Pierce said, her voice calm but filled with urgency. "The longer we stay out here, the more vulnerable we become." As the team made their way deeper into the Zeltrian capital, they encountered the first signs of resistance. Zeltrian soldiers, heavily armored and armed with energy weapons, appeared from the shadows, their eyes glowing with an unnatural intensity. They were the first wave of defense, but Pierce and her team were ready. A firefight broke out as the team fought to push forward. The humans' weapons were powerful, but the Zeltrians were relentless, using their strange energy-based technology to push the soldiers back. The battle raged on, with Colonel Pierce leading her team with deadly precision. But it wasn't just the Zeltrians they had to worry about. As they advanced, they began to see signs of something more terrifying. Large, twisted shapes moved in the shadows, creatures that seemed to be a blend of technology and organic matter. These were the biological weapons the Zeltrians had been hiding. The creatures were huge, their bodies covered in metallic armor that fused with their alien flesh. Their eyes glowed with an eerie light, and their movements were unnervingly fast. They were the Zeltrians' ultimate weapon, creatures created to hunt, kill, and protect the heart of their empire. "Get down," Pierce shouted as one of the creatures lunged at her team. The soldiers opened fire, but the creature's armor absorbed most of the blasts, and it kept coming. "We need to move. Now," Pierce ordered. "We can't waste time on these things." The team fought their way through the terrifying creatures, moving closer to the underground facility where the device was located. The clock was ticking, and they knew that if they didn't reach the device soon, it would be too late. The biological weapon, the living organism that powered the entire Zeltrian war machine, had to be destroyed. There was no other choice. But the deeper they went into the heart of the Zeltrian capital, the more they realized that this war wasn't just about power. It was about survival, not just for Earth, but for the future of every living being in the galaxy. The battle on the surface of the Zeltrian homeworld had taken a heavy toll. Colonel Pierce and her team fought with everything they had, pushing forward through the twisted landscape, surrounded by the terrifying creatures that the Zeltrians had unleashed. But despite their strength and courage, the team was running out of time. They needed to find the device. Now, every minute that passed brought them closer to a disaster they might not survive. Back aboard the Eagle's Fury, Admiral Xander paced restlessly in the command center, his eyes locked on the displays showing the battlefield below. The team was holding their ground, but it was clear that they couldn't fight forever. The biological weapons were relentless, and the deeper they went into the Zeltrian capital, the more resistance they encountered. "Admiral, we've intercepted another transmission from Dr. Carter," Lieutenant Vega said, her voice urgent. "She's got some new information." Xander immediately moved to the communication station. Dr. Carter's face appeared on the screen, her expression filled with determination. "Admiral," Dr. Carter said, her voice crackling through the static. "We found something. We've discovered a weakness in the biological weapon. It's not invincible. We can destroy it, but we need your team to get to the heart of the facility. The device is connected to the organism that powers their weapons. If we destroy the device, it will kill the biological weapon and shut down their entire system." Xander's heart raced. This was the breakthrough they needed, their one chance to end the Zeltrian threat once and for all. "What do we need to do?" he asked, his voice steady. Dr. Carter's eyes lit up with hope. "We've developed a new weapon, an energy pulse that can disrupt the connection between the device and the organism. If you can get close enough to the heart of the facility, we can target the device with the pulse and destroy it. It's a long shot, but it's our best chance." Xander didn't hesitate. "I'll order Colonel Pierce to move forward with the plan. If we can't destroy it, nothing else matters." The transmission ended, and Xander turned to Commander Wright, who had been standing quietly by his side. "We've got one shot at this," Xander said, his voice filled with urgency. "Prepare the fleet to provide all the support they need. We can't afford to lose this opportunity." Meanwhile, on the surface, Colonel Pierce and her team were nearing the central facility. They had pushed through waves of Zeltrian soldiers and their terrifying biological weapons, but their strength was waning. The creatures they faced seemed endless, and their energy was running low. "Stay focused, team," Pierce said, her voice calm despite the chaos around her. "We're almost there. The device is just ahead." The team moved quickly, their weapons raised, eyes scanning the dark corridors of the underground facility. The walls were covered with strange alien symbols and energy conduits that hummed with power. The closer they got to the core, the stronger the energy pulse became. They could feel it in the air, a strange, almost oppressive force. "This is it," Pierce said, her eyes narrowing. "The heart of their power. We need to destroy it now." Just as they reached the central chamber, they were met by the final wave of defense, the largest biological weapon yet. It towered over them, its eyes glowing with an eerie light. It was the ultimate guardian, the last line of defense for the Zeltrians. "Get ready," Pierce shouted. "We can't let it stop us now." The creature roared and lunged at the team, its massive claws reaching out with deadly force. The soldiers fired, but the creature's armor was nearly impenetrable. They needed to buy time for the pulse to reach the device. "Hold them off," Pierce commanded, taking a step forward. She knew this was their only chance. They had to destroy the device, no matter the cost. As the battle raged on around them, the fleet above began its final approach. Xander's voice echoed through the comms. "We're ready to fire. Hold on, Colonel. We'll hit the device with everything we have." The pulse of energy from the fleet's weapons began to build, and Pierce's team held their ground. They had one shot to destroy the biological weapon and the device that powered it. Failure was not an option. The battle for the Zeltrian capital had reached its peak. Colonel Pierce and her team were locked in a fierce struggle with the Zeltrians' ultimate biological weapon, a massive, monstrous creature that towered over them. Its glowing eyes burned with an unnatural intensity, and its armored skin made it nearly invincible to human weapons. But Pierce and her soldiers refused to back down. They knew that the survival of humanity depended on this one final push. "Keep firing," Pierce shouted, her voice strong despite the chaos around her. "We need to hold it off until the pulse hits." Her team obeyed without hesitation. They poured everything they had into the creature, blasting it with energy weapons and explosives, but it barely flinched. The creature roared, swinging its massive claws, knocking soldiers aside with terrifying force. The air was thick with smoke and the sounds of battle. Time was running out. Above, on the Eagle's Fury, Admiral Xander watched the live feed from the ground battle, his heart racing. He knew they were close. The pulse that would destroy the device and shut down the Zeltrians' biological weapon was ready. But there was one problem. The biological weapon had to be defeated first. If it wasn't taken down in time, the pulse wouldn't work. "Commander Wright, we're in position. We can fire at the device now," Xander said, his voice calm but urgent. "Tell Colonel Pierce to hold on, just a little longer." "Understood, Admiral," Wright replied, tapping his console. The fleet above began charging their weapons. This was the moment they had all been waiting for, the moment that would decide the fate of both Earth and the Zeltrian Empire. Back on the surface, Colonel Pierce wasn't giving up. She ordered her team to fall back slightly to regroup and reassess. "Fall back to the corner," she shouted, leading her team away from the creature's deadly claws. The soldiers moved as quickly as they could, but the creature was relentless. It followed them, roaring in anger, determined to stop them from reaching the device. "We can't let it catch us," Pierce said, her mind racing. "We need to get to that device now." They were close, so close. The pulse was already on its way, but the creature was still between them and their goal. Pierce glanced at the rest of her team, each of them grim but determined. "Get ready," Pierce called. "On my mark, we make a break for it." The team nodded, understanding what had to be done. They couldn't afford to hesitate. Every second counted. The creature howled again, its claws slashing the air as it charged forward, aiming to crush them. "Now," Pierce shouted. With one last burst of energy, the soldiers sprinted for the heart of the facility, dodging blasts from the creature as they reached the device. Pierce, leading the charge, slammed into the control panel of the device, her fingers scrambling to activate the pulse. At the same moment, high above the battlefield, the Eagle's Fury fired its energy pulse directly at the device. "Fire," Admiral Xander commanded, his eyes never leaving the screen. The fleet's massive energy weapons shot their powerful pulses toward the surface, aimed precisely at the heart of the enemy's weapon. Time seemed to freeze as the energy from both the device and the pulse collided. For a moment, there was silence, a heavy, deafening silence. Then, a blinding flash of light erupted from the device, sending shockwaves through the entire facility. The biological weapon let out a final blood-curdling scream before collapsing to the ground, its body twitching as the energy from the pulse completely severed the connection. Colonel Pierce and her team dropped to the ground, exhausted and battered, but alive. The creature was down. The device was destroyed. They had done it. We did it, Pierce said, her voice barely a whisper. She could hardly believe it, but the devastation around her told the story. Humanity had won. The Zeltrian Empire's hold on their war machine was shattered. Back on the Eagle's Fury, Admiral Xander allowed himself a small, relieved smile. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. The Zeltrians were not finished yet, but for now, humanity had taken a crucial step forward. The enemy had been defeated, their secret exposed, and Earth had exacted its vengeance. "Prepare for the retreat," Xander said, his voice strong once more. "We've won this round, but we've got a long way to go." The victory over the Zeltrians seemed almost too good to be true. The device was destroyed. The biological weapon had been defeated, and the enemy was left in disarray. Colonel Pierce and her team had successfully completed their mission, and the fleet above had ensured their escape. Earth had taken its first major step toward reclaiming its future. The mood aboard the Eagle's Fury was one of quiet celebration, but Admiral Xander couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was wrong. As the fleet began its retreat from the Zeltrian homeworld, Xander remained on the bridge, staring out into the vastness of space. The battle had been fierce, but the enemy's power had been broken. Or so he thought. "Admiral, we've completed the initial damage reports," Commander Wright said as he entered the command center. "The fleet is in good condition, considering the circumstances, but we should prepare for any counterattack. The Zeltrians won't give up easily." Xander nodded, his eyes narrowing. "We're not out of danger yet, but we've dealt them a serious blow. We need to stay vigilant." Just as Xander was about to turn away, Lieutenant Vega rushed in, her face pale. "Admiral, we've just intercepted a message from one of the high-ranking officers in our fleet, Captain Harris." Xander's heart skipped a beat. Captain Harris had been one of his most trusted commanders, a man known for his loyalty and sharp instincts. "What's going on, Lieutenant?" Vega's voice faltered as she spoke. It's a betrayal. Harris is working with the Zeltrians. He's turned against us." Xander's mind raced. Harris, a traitor. It didn't make sense. He was the last person Xander would have suspected. "Patch me through to Harris now," Xander ordered, his voice cold with anger and disbelief. The screen flickered, and Harris's face appeared on the main display. He looked calm, almost too calm, and his eyes held no trace of the man Xander had known. "Admiral Xander," Harris said, his voice smooth and collected. "I suppose you're wondering why I did it." Xander's fists clenched. "Why Harris? After everything we've been through, how could you betray us?" Harris didn't flinch. "The Zeltrians offered me power, something you could never give me. You're all so focused on revenge, so blind to the bigger picture. I've seen the potential of the Zeltrian Empire, and I've decided to join them. You should have done the same. Earth is weak. You've been fighting a losing war from the start." Xander's eyes burned with fury, but he kept his composure. "You've made a mistake, Harris. The Zeltrians won't honor you. They'll use you until you're no longer useful. You'll be just another pawn in their game." Harris smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I'm not the one who's lost, Admiral. You're the one who's blind to the future. The Zeltrians have already taken steps to ensure your fleet's destruction. You'll never make it out of this system alive." Before Xander could respond, the transmission abruptly cut off. The bridge fell silent as the crew processed what had just happened. "Admiral, we've detected a massive fleet of Zeltrian warships, hidden behind the asteroid field," Vega said, her voice shaky. "They've been waiting for us. It was a trap. Harris has led us straight into it." Xander's mind raced. Harris had betrayed them. And now Earth's fleet was walking right into an ambush. The Zeltrians had been prepared for this moment all along, using their own commander to lure them into a final confrontation. "Ready the fleet for combat," Sander ordered, his voice sharp and commanding. "We're not going down without a fight." As the fleet braced for impact, Sander felt a wave of disbelief wash over him. The battle was far from over. They had won a crucial victory, but now they were facing a final test, a test of loyalty, strength, and survival. The enemy wasn't just the Zeltrians anymore. It was the betrayal that had come from within their own ranks. And Sander knew that this fight was going to be harder than any they had faced before. The silence in the command center of the Eagle's fury was deafening. The fleet had been ambushed. Captain Harris' betrayal had led them straight into the jaws of the Zeltrian fleet, which had been waiting behind the asteroid field. Sander gripped the edge of the command console, his mind racing. They were outnumbered and surrounded, but he couldn't allow himself to fall into despair. Earth had already lost so much. He couldn't let this be the end. "Admiral, the Zeltrians have engaged us." Commander Wright's voice cut through the tension, steady but grim. "We've got multiple enemy ships closing in on all sides. It's a full assault." Sander didn't need to look at the screens to know how bad it was. The Zeltrians were relentless, their ships closing in with deadly precision. They had the element of surprise and the advantage in numbers. Earth's fleet, though strong, was not prepared for a battle of this scale. The betrayal had put them in a fight they had never expected. "Get us out of here," Sander snapped. "Head toward the outer rim of the system. We need space to maneuver." "We're trying, Admiral, but they've locked onto us," Vega said, her voice tight. "They're jamming our engines. We can't break free." Sander's gaze shifted to the battle reports streaming in. The fleet was already taking hits, and they were losing ships fast. The Zeltrians had more firepower, and with Harris's insider knowledge, they had perfectly timed their attack. It was a trap, and the walls were closing in. "Prepare to counterattack," Sander ordered. "Focus on breaking their formation. We can't run. We fight. Every ship, every soul aboard this fleet is worth saving. We have to make this count." Commander Wright nodded. "Understood, Admiral. All ships, prepare for evasive maneuvers. Target the enemy's weak points and strike fast. Hold your ground." As the battle raged on, Sander knew their chances were slim. Harris's betrayal had made it impossible to escape, and they were trapped in the heart of the enemy's fire. But he wouldn't let his people die in vain. He had to find a way out. "Vega, can we get any communication through to the fleet? Any chance of reinforcements?" Sander asked, his voice calm despite the chaos unfolding around them. "Nothing yet, Admiral," Vega replied, frustration creeping into her tone. "We're completely cut off. The Zeltrians are using a full-spectrum jammer. We can't reach anyone outside the system." Sander's mind raced, weighing his options. The Zeltrians had trapped them, but he wasn't ready to give up. The Eagle's fury and the rest of the fleet were humanity's last line of defense. If they went down, they would go down fighting, every last one of them. "Get me Harris," Sander commanded. "Now." After a few moments, the screen flickered to life. Harris's face appeared, but this time there was no smug smile, no hint of confidence. He looked as surprised as anyone. "Admiral Xander," Harris said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're still alive. I didn't expect that." Xander's eyes burned with fury. "Why, Harris? After everything, why betray us like this?" Harris sighed, shaking his head. "You never understood, did you, Xander? It was never about loyalty. It was about power. The Zeltrians offered me something you could never give me. The future of the galaxy, in exchange for my service. I had no choice." "You had a choice," Sander shot back. "And you chose to sell out your own people. You'll regret this." Harris remained silent for a moment. "Maybe, but right now, you're the one who's lost, Admiral." Xander's gaze hardened. I don't need your pity. We're not finished yet. You've made one fatal mistake, Harris. What's that? Harris asked, his voice filled with arrogance. You underestimated humanity, Xander said, his voice low and determined. We fight when there's no hope, and we will never stop fighting. The transmission ended abruptly, and Xander turned to his crew. All ships, fire everything we have. This isn't over. We fight to the end. As the first blasts from their weapons streaked into the Zeltrian fleet, Xander knew they had little time left. But for the first time since the battle began, he felt a surge of hope. Even if Earth's fleet was outmatched and outgunned, humanity had something the Zeltrians would never understand: the will to survive, no matter the odds. The battle was over. Silence had descended over the battlefield, the wreckage of Earth's fleet scattered across the void of space. The once mighty Eagle's Fury drifted slowly, its hull scared and battered. The remaining ships, though few, held on, their systems barely functioning. The Zeltrian fleet, too, had taken heavy damage, but their reinforcements had come in full force, overwhelming humanity's remaining forces. Admiral Xander stood at the command center, staring at the silent view of space. His heart weighed heavy with the cost of the fight. The Zeltrians had been dealt a blow, yes, but at what price? Hundreds of thousands of soldiers had given their lives, and Earth's fleet was broken, its strength scattered. Admiral, Commander Wright said softly, stepping up beside him. We've lost contact with the remaining fleet. It's over. Xander didn't respond immediately. His mind was racing. They had fought so hard, had sacrificed so much. But now, they were left with the haunting truth: they had lost. The Zeltrians were still a threat, and the cost of the betrayal had been too much to bear. We failed, Xander said, his voice low. We couldn't hold them off. Harris led us into a trap. Wright nodded, but his expression remained determined. We gave everything, Admiral. We didn't lose because we stopped fighting. We lost because the enemy was better prepared. But it doesn't mean we've given up. We still have people left. And Earth is still standing. Xander turned to face him, his eyes hard with resolve. And what now? What do we do with what's left? We rebuild, Wright said, his voice firm. We find a way to keep fighting. We learn from our mistakes, and we make sure that this never happens again. There are still people who believe in humanity, and we can't let Harris' betrayal define us. Not now, not ever. Xander let out a long breath, his shoulders heavy with the weight of everything they had lost. But Wright's words lingered in his mind. They couldn't let the defeat be their end. There had to be more. They couldn't just let the Zeltrians win. Start gathering the survivors, Xander said, his voice suddenly sharp with new purpose. We need to rebuild. We need to regroup. And most importantly, we need to make sure the Zeltrians understand that Earth will never surrender. Wright gave a nod of approval, already moving to organize the crew. Xander watched him go, a sense of new determination building inside him. Earth's people had been pushed to the brink, but they had fought back. And though they had suffered a crushing blow, they had survived. As the crew of the Eagle's Fury began to work, Xander knew they had a long road ahead. The Zeltrians had seen the strength of humanity, but they hadn't yet seen everything. Earth had been wounded, but it wasn't finished. Xander turned toward the stars outside, his mind focused on what came next. The war wasn't over. Earth had been dealt a blow, but humanity had survived. And as long as there were people who refused to give up, the Zeltrians would never truly win. Get to work, Xander ordered. We rebuild, and when the time comes, we'll strike back. Earth is still here, and Earth will fight.